Welcome to the May edition of Historic Racing News. This month we'll recap the Goodwood members meeting and Monaco Historique.
It was an idyllic trip and it was unbelievable, capped off with the most delicious icing and a huge juicy cherry on top, which was Monaco Historique.
We'll also have the first instalment of our new Racer of the Month feature.
Nobody was going to black flag Graham Hill at Silverstone. Lella finally realised that she won't get past him. So, but she was absolutely furious about it. And one of the March mechanics told me that when she came and parked the car in the garage after the race, runs into the back of the garage, picks up the biggest spanner she can find, and heads off down the pit lane to go and interview Graham.
That's all coming up on Historic Racing News, where motorsport's history lives. Now, here is your host, Paul Tarsey.
Greetings. The programme for May is absolutely full of great things for any historic motorsports enthusiast who might like to keep up to date with the news and maybe take an occasional look back in time as well. Jon Saltinstall, renowned author, is going to be joining us to look at the life and times of one of the world's most successful female racing drivers, and that's Lella Lombardi. Also in the show this month, Saif Assam tells us about his historic racing cars. Rob Young will be on the line from South Africa, and we'll be talking about a time when Formula One cars were routinely built in South African sheds and barns and garages and all sorts of stuff. And we'll learn about one such car which is still racing.
So Ken Terrell built cars in South Africa.
Nice
I
point.
didn't know that.
And as you've probably gathered, I'm joined by Jim Roller and by Paul Jurd. And gentlemen, you've both had a busy April. Jim, let's start with you and your French trip. You told us last month of what you were planning and finished at Monaco Historique. Was that everything you wanted it to be?
It was an idyllic trip and it was unbelievable, capped off with the most delicious icing and a huge juicy cherry on top, which was Monaco Historique. And I can't say enough about Matt Twineham's and the Twineham's Tours folks. They wined us and dined us, and it was just absolutely over the top. We'll hear from our contest winners in a little while, and it was just absolutely more than I could ever expect. And on top of that, the racing was pretty darn good. So all in all, it was just fantastic. It provided us with some lifelong memories, that's for sure.
And that whole Monaco Historique thing is amazing, isn't it? And I know that we'd had lots of conversations before we went, and I had to pick up your chin from the paddock floor a couple of times where you were standing there with your mouth wide open. Was it what you expected?
With the quality of cars, yeah, it was exactly what I expected. And it was a cornucopia of everything that has ever happened at Monaco, including the sports cars. Sports cars at Monaco. Well, yeah, there was one year that they did run the sports cars at Monaco, and that is represented by one of the classes, and that provided with some great racing. It was not the level of driving that I expected. You had your, Nick Padmore, Michael Lyons, Stewie Hall, all those guys, top notch. Just not above reproach when it comes to driving standards and everything else. Some of the other drivers, they were obviously the gentlemen who own the cars, and I do not begrudge them one bit being out there.
No.
And good for them. And I'm especially pleased that people like that bring those cars out so fans can see them. And some of them are fan favorites, And so it is absolutely crucial that continue. So I don't sit here and disparage them, but they made some mistakes on that racetrack that, they might have got away with somewhere else, but at Monaco it is so precise.
It was interesting, wasn't it, that with on the Friday on free practice, there was a Formula One Ferrari that came out of the tunnel and broke the nose off against the barrier as it came out under braking. That particular driver probably should have known better, because he's called Jean Alesi. Yes. And that he certainly should have known better. But I take your point, Jim, and I think it's a valid one, because there's a lot there. And Paul Jurd, I think unfortunately your commitments were such that you couldn't make Monaco, but I know you watched a lot of it on the TV, and that whole thing on the Sunday of them working through the races, so they do them chronologically. You start early on Sunday morning with the Bugattis and the Alfa Romeos. That does give you, Paul, a very, very clear walk-through time, doesn't it?
It was interesting, because you did see that progression, and it was quite fantastic. And I'm just, from my impression from a distance, was exactly what Jim said. You had the guys at the front pushing so hard, and you also had some heartbreak. Richard Bradley, who was winning the pre-war race, or for the very early cars anyway, the car pulled off on the last lap, magneto failure. He said he knew it was going the lap before. He thought he could get it home, but he couldn't. But that's how much these guys, it means to them to be on the podium. You said exactly what I was going to say. Your Stuart Hall, your Michael Lyons, your Quick Nick Padmores, they were right up there. Yeah, some of the other drivers obviously not at speed, but just what an opportunity to see those cars in that setting.
The moment you talk about there in that pre-war race was probably the height of sportsmanship from the entire weekend, because when the eventual winner came around on his cool-down lap, Richard was standing there with his helmet off, and the winner stopped, and Richard went over and gave him a big hug and congratulations, that's good for you that you won it. And instead of just storming off because he'd lost a race that was right in his grasp, he waited and congratulated the winner in a very poignant way. It was outstanding.
Yeah, and that Patrick Blakeney-Edwards, who was that winner, was magnanimous as well, which was great to see. Mm-hmm. But you enjoyed your Twynham's tour, I know, and thanks to Matt for his kindness in introducing a couple of winners as well, who you got to talk to.
I'm with Mark Bowley.
That'll do.
And
I used to do anything, Jim.
Anything but late for dinner like me, right? And Daz, introduce yourself to the fans.
I am Daz Seabridge from the UK.
There we go. You won the contest.
I did.
How'd he get lucky enough to come along?
Well, he got lucky enough to come along because my youngest son has got his mock exams this week.
Ooh.
So if it hadn't been that, I'd have bought my little son,
okay.
6'3".
Yeah. Well, that's about your size, though.
Yeah, close, yeah. The actual truth is he just wanted somebody handsome on his arm.
Oh, you guys are going to fit right in with this crowd. Well, congratulations. Has it lived up to your expectations?
Absolutely not. It's gone well beyond that. Far beyond. A couple of nice surprises. We got told that last night that we were going to be transferred in by helicopter, and both of us were stunned, absolutely speechless. That flight, it was just incredible. Really enjoyed it. The racing has been superb. There's some great cars here, and it's been well beyond what we were expecting.
Yeah, Daz, what's been your favorite part?
Seeing some of the cars from when I was younger, seeing the liveries again, absolutely stunning. And the sound and the viewpoint of the track from here, obviously we can see quite a large percentage of the track from here, so yeah, it's been really, really good.
Yeah, food's been pretty good too, huh?
Yeah, it's not been too bad. There was a very nice pork pie.
Yes.
Not hard to make it.
Yeah, a little bit different than the pork pie you get back home.
Yeah, it's not quite as good, but it was nearly there.
So, do you have a favorite year? This event goes all the way back to pre-war cars, all the way up to cars from the early 80s, and they break them down into groups. Do you have a favorite group so far?
Up to now, everything has been as good as everything else. So the really early stuff, the Bugattis and the Alphas, right up to the turbo cars. The grids have just been stunning.
Yes,
They're really great.
They really have. And our friend of the show, Nick Padmore, finished second earlier today in his group in his Lotus 77. So that was congratulations to Nick. Daz, what about you? What's been your favorite group of cars to watch?
Pretty much as you just said, yeah, the John Flair special delivery on all actors, just amazing. It's that was one of the liveries that got me into watching the sport. So for me to see that come in so well was great. But then the early cars, the smell, every now and again we get a gust of wind, bring the oil smell up to the Valkyrie. It was just great. Everything about it, the atmosphere, the smells. So get you involved.
Yeah, exactly. Well, guys, so glad you could join us. So glad you're having a great time, and special thanks to Matt Twynham Tours for helping us put the contest together, and be looking for more contests. You'll have to enter next time, Dad, to pay your money back.
I won't be entering any fees in it because
No, it's been absolutely fabulous. We've got to think, like Jim says, we've got to thank Matt for everything he's done for us. They've been absolutely incredible. Really, really good.
Well, congratulations again, and it's been a pleasure to get to spend a weekend with you two guys. It's been a lot of fun.
Not many people say that, Jim.
And I didn't even get paid to.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks.
You're listening to Historic Racing News.
Paul Jurd, you kept a weather eye on the Goodwood members meeting, and I know you had a look at that. But you've been having a strange look. No, Paul Jurd having a strange look? No, never. But you've been in the TARDIS back at 1976.
It is. I was thinking about this with the James Hunt and the Barry Sheene and that year of 1976, and we know everyone looks back on these guys as heroes, and I just thought it's actually quite important to put a bit of context, because 1976, the UK was, to be honest, it was not in a great place. We had high unemployment, I think 5%. We had high inflation. It was spiking to over 10% at times across the year. We had to get a £2.3 billion loan from the International Monetary Fund just to keep the country running. And we also had that summer where there was a drought. We had rivers drying up, we had water shortages. And just to top it all, we were woeful at sport. We were absolutely awful at sport. 1976, Montreal Olympics. The Russians won 49 gold medals. The drug-addled East German team won 40. The USA won 34. We managed 3. And oddly enough, one of those was David Wilkie, long-haired, very good-looking young man. A little bit of a pattern developing here. Cricket, English cricket team. The West Indies came over. 5 tests. We won 0. We managed to draw 2, but we got absolutely annihilated by the West Indies. It was the European Football Championships. The England football team didn't even qualify to go to the finals. And if you want to follow it through to the end of the year, close to your heart, rugby. The 5 Nations. England came last. They lost every single game, and in no game did they score more than 12 points. We were a disaster of a nation.
Worse than Italy?
Yep. Italy weren't in it at the time. It was the 5 Nations.
Yeah. That's why we let them in.
I was going to say, that explains a lot.
They had to make us look good. So we were dire. We were awful. There could have been no good news all year. And then you had these 2 good-looking young guys who were winning. They were taking on the world, and they were winning. And I think that's partly why they have, the stories of those two guys, Barry Sheene and James Hunt, have carried on so long, because compared to everything else that was going on in the country at that time, they were this shining light of, we can achieve something, we can actually win something.
I think nostalgia isn't what it used to be, as they say, and that I can remember those times very clearly, and that James Hunt wasn't universally the hero. Neither was Barry Sheene. That he had this bee in his bonnet about being anti-authority and anti-establishment, and that John Hogan from Marlborough used to take him into a quiet room and beat him about the head with a cricket bat, because he'd turn up at a commercial function.
Oh yeah.
In which was all black tie, and he'd turn up in jeans, no shoes, no socks, and a t-shirt, and we kind of forget that, and we kind of forget how he was. Yes, he was a huge star. Yes, he was all those things, and I'm not going to take any of that away. But he was a nightmare as well.
He could be an arse when he wanted to be.
Yes. Yes.
And of course, Barry Sheene hadn't met Kenny Roberts yet. That was life-changing.
Oh.
Barry Sheene.
It was an interesting one. I mean, there was some other fascinating stuff that went on at members' meeting. For me, one of the high spots was what they called the Prothero Cup, named after Dick Prothero, who was a famous privateer racing driver who ran E-types, and particularly a series of E-types which were all carrying the same registration number of Cut 7, and that when he sold one, he'd take Cut 7 off that and put it on something else. The Prothero Cup, won by quite a powerful team of people. That's Dario Franchitti and Gregor Fiskin who won that exclusively for E-type Jaguars, of varying degrees of development, let's say, but they were all basically road cars.
Is that a euphemism for legality?
Yes, because I'm being very careful here, because our lawyers are on the other line at the moment.
We cheated how?
That's the ones, because there were 3 cars which didn't start in that race, and that, as I understand it, allegedly, and any other words you want to put in before I say this, there were 3 cars that had technical infringements discovered before race day. We've had situations where the then Lord March, now the Duke of Richmond, put down a video saying that if you're going to come and try and duck under the rules, you won't get invited again. We're going to see about that, but we're going to have a bit of a look in the future about cars which perhaps stretch the rule book as far as they can.
If indeed these machines were contravening the rules, nobody can say they weren't warned.
That's a very good point. I mean, other things for me at members' meeting, we had the Win Percy Trophy, which was for
great race.
Oh, wasn't it great? Wasn't it fabulous? We're talking about escorts, and we're talking about one sort of rogue Volkswagen Golf that was out there, and the BMW 323 from the county championship, which
Gosh, that takes you back. Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Came through.
County championship was a promotion that BMW ran, and each dealership could enter their car, and all the cars were exactly the same and run for the first time by this sort of emerging race team called Tom Walkinshaw Racing, and they would arrive with 2 or 3 car transporters with these race prepared BMW 3 Series on it, and the Norfolk car was driven by a young lad called Martin Brundle. So it was only fitting that the Win Percy Trophy, the very same car, was driven by his son Alex, which I think was great. But they were great races, and that after a huge schmozzle, where one of the leading cars got disqualified, got penalised 10 seconds for hitting the chicane, and then there was a schmozzle at the chicane on the last lap, and eventually that we got through all of that. Guy Smith was the person who won that first part, which was the celeb drivers from Rob Huff, Alex Buncan and Phil Keane, who I didn't know was once a Stig.
He was, yes, for quite a long time actually.
Yeah, but there was that. That we had the Phil Hill Cup, which was for sports and GT cars, and that was won by a chap in an E-Type with Cut 8 registration, again a Dick Prothero car, and that was a chap called Jensen Button, and I have to say,
I've heard of him.
Yeah,
heard of him.
He showed just how good he is, because that E-Type shouldn't have won.
No.
Oh, really?
It shouldn't have won. It was simply that he is extraordinarily good. He beat a Ferrari 250 LM
in an E-Type,
and he in an E-Type, and he beat a Ford GT40 into third place. I'm not going to put that to bed without saying I also had a very, very pleasant Friday afternoon where I interviewed Ross Brawn for an hour and a half for the Goodwood Road Racing Club. That will be on the show probably in a couple of bits, I think, in months to come. But what a nice chap, what a splendid chap he is, and it was a good event. But I made my way down to the braking area for Woodcote to watch a couple of races.
Did you bring your flak jacket?
Yeah, quite, because I was privy to 2 significant accidents. Thankfully, nobody was hurt, but on one of them, 2 cars touched on the way into Woodcote under braking. It was the unique Lotus 19 with a Ferrari engine. Touched the Chevron B8. The Lotus sort of went into the barrier fairly hard. The Chevron went in at an angle, and if I tell you that car spun around and ended up in the middle of the track, but it probably went through 180 degrees twice in 2 seconds. It was like a spinning top, and then exactly the same type of accident happened in the sports car race after that with a Cobra, which did exactly the same thing. And I would be interested to know your views, gentlemen, on is Goodwood getting too dangerous?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Part of the allure of Goodwood is it is so traditional. And we know, and I'm sure this is on the mind of the GRRC. I've had a couple of conversations with people who've said, we can't do the lap times we did 3 or 4 years ago because now we have to have this, or we've got this rev limit, or whatever. Yeah. So there is an awareness of it. There is not a lot of runoff in a lot of places. You're exactly right, and there are some very, very quick cars on there. And also, the cars now are going quicker than those cars went in period. For a whole variety of reasons. There's drivers out there, and I'm not saying they're bad, they're pretty good drivers, but they're not good enough to have taken a Lotus Cortina around 2 or 3 seconds quicker than Jim Clark ever did in the 1960s. I looked up the times once, and they are literally 2 or 3 seconds quicker, which is just the setup and all the little bits that you can do to the car now. The full roll cage helps, etc., etc. It's a tricky one. There's a fine line that I think they are walking, and they have so far mostly, I think, stayed on the right side of it. But you do worry if there is a really big one.
I think you're right, Paul. And I think the other thing, though, is that they're lapping faster than those cars did in period, but those cars are no safer.
No.
That's a valid point. But I also think it comes down as much to the drivers. There are some drivers there who take it, I don't want to say way too seriously, but they put themselves and their cars and their fellow competitors in situations, and I'm looking at you, Romain Dumas. Yes, it's racing, and one of the things we love about Goodwood is that they really race. They don't go out and parade. Same for most of the field at Monaco. They go out and race. And that's what makes Goodwood the pure and wonderful event that it is. But it is incumbent upon the drivers to understand that they are not out there competing for the WEC championship. They're not out there competing for the Formula One title. They're not out there competing for the British Touring Car Championship. They're out there to enjoy and relive the history of our sport that makes it such a grand and wonderful history and an event. And I think you can have all the drivers' meetings that you want, but they're going to need to, much like they have talked about with regulations and having draconian penalties if your car isn't to snuff. Driving standards need to be held to a very, very high standard because of the fact that this racetrack will bite you.
Yeah, I think you put it very well there, Jurd. There are lots of ways to keep up with historic racing news. Our podcast comes out on the first Wednesday of every month. The 2-hour show includes interviews with drivers and other personalities from years gone by, plus news of historic events like the Goodwood Revival and the Silverstone Festival. And Jim Roller keeps us up to speed on happenings stateside and looks at the activities both on and off the track in the USA.
And you can also follow us on our YouTube channel, HRN Chronicles. It's our version of a time machine. We have archive features, exclusive interviews, and behind-the-scenes stories going way back into the history of our glorious sport. Plus, we keep an eye on the latest classic and competition car auction news. It's a place where motorsports history lives.
And don't forget our amazing Facebook page. With over 1 million views a month, it is one of the leading social media channels for the historic racing fan. We feature tales from years gone by, news from around the racing world, and we also take the opportunity to flesh out the stories we cover on our podcasts with photographs and yet more background information.
If you would like to find more editions of the Historic Racing News podcast, try searching Historic Racing News wherever you get your podcasts.
The YouTube channel is simply called HRN Chronicles.
And just search Facebook for the Historic Racing News page.
You're listening to Historic Racing News. Now back to your host, Paul Tarsey.
If you look back at the history of motor racing, particularly in South Africa, there are a disproportionate amount of fabulous stories. Had you been lucky enough to attend the single-seater races of the 1950s and 60s in South Africa, you'd not only have seen the cars which were imports from the UK and from Europe, but also a whole host of homegrown specials. I think specials is what we should call it, known as bitsers at the time, bits of this and bits of that. You might have seen, for example, the Walman Borgward Special, or the Heron, or even the Eland Simca. And in fact, there was a whole separate culture of car builders at that point. And I'm joined by Robert Young, who is, although he says he's not, he's a bit of an expert on these cars. Rob, welcome to the show. At this time, we were beginning to see European and British cars all over the world, the Coopers, the Lotus, the Stanghelinis, the occasional Ferrari or Maserati or whatever. But in southern Africa, there was a culture of building specials. Why was that?
Thanks for getting together, Paul. The main thing was the Southern African enthusiasts were 6,000 miles away from the factories. Secondly, they couldn't afford new cars, and in those days the factories didn't have many surplus cars to sell, and they sometimes would palm off last year's model if you were lucky enough. And then the other thing, if you couldn't get, there was import duty was we were recovering from a period of austerity after war, and import duty was punitive. So what could these chaps do? A lot of them had worked in Europe. They'd been in the armed services, the early chaps, and people had emigrated. They'd worked at companies like Rolls-Royce and Austin. So the ideas were there, and these fellows were resourceful. The scrapyards had parts to find, and so if you couldn't buy it, you had to make it yourself.
And obviously they did, and we've seen countless different specials. I think interesting you should say there, Rob, because with the Tasman series and things in Australia and New Zealand, you would get the Coopers and Lotuses of this world would take out last year's cars, or they would build cars specially or whatever, on the basis that they weren't going to bring them back to the UK, that they would sell them there. But that didn't really happen in South Africa, did it?
Dick Gibson was the first British driver. I don't know if you remember him. He used to tour here in the late 50s and very early 60s and bring two Coopers, old, what should we say, 1957 Mark IIs, probably called a T43 today. And then he would seek to sell them to locals after his trip, and then come back the next year. And some of those were the earliest proper single-seaters, rear-engine cars that did come here, after all the little cycle cars, or whatever we want to call little 500s.
Yes, all those frighteningly dangerous cars that the Formula 3 500cc cars. I mean, that was amazing. But with Formula 1, and Formula 1 was a very different animal then from what it is now. It goes without saying. And but I think what we had then was literally, it was a formula. It was, okay, so here is a set of regulations that you can build a car to and call it a Formula 1 car. And anybody could run a Formula 1 race, couldn't they? And presumably that's what happened in Southern Africa.
Yes. In the 1st of January 1960, we had the first Grand Prix here after the war. There was quite a lot of high-level racing pre-war in South Africa. The auto unions used to come out here, the Maserati teams, the likes of Earl Howe and the wealthy British privateers. And then everything obviously lapsed after the war. And as the enthusiasts got together, 1948-ish and up to 1958, there was handicap racing with a vast array of specials. They were powered by big American engines, small little British Austins and MGs. But after that, with Moss and Bristow and Paul Freer coming out, racing became serious, and the public digested this and loved it. So it was decided to build 4 top-class tracks, probably very dangerous by today's standard.
Yeah, probably.
And then a Formula One South African Championship was instituted, and the poor old handicap cap system fell away, and it was 1500cc, hence the specials.
Right. What cars would I have seen on the road in South Africa at that sort of time? Was it European cars? Was it American cars? What was the staple?
The roads were horrendous at even up to about 1961. No freeways. If you went 1,000 miles from one major city to the other, you went through farms, and there were like these cattle gates there, the cattle grid hadn't been thought of then, so there were gates, wire gates, and you opened the gate, closed it, and went on.
And this would be a major route between cities.
Yeah, and the racing cars used to generally go by train from city to city, until things got more developed. The most popular cars were the big American cars, because they were robust enough to master those roads. But there were British car factories, Austin and MG. There was a BMC factory in South Africa. There was an Alfa factory, Alfa Romeo, and then Citroen is a very popular make, and German cars, DKWs and Volkswagen. They were Volkswagen plants. So there was a lot going in the motoring scene in the late 50s, early 60s.
That's interesting that there was that construction aspect to the South African market, and something that is very clear to me is that some of those cars have got, it's an overused expression these days, but very random engines that, you're seeing things with Borgward engines, and you're seeing things with DKWs and all sorts of different things. Was that because those engines were available, or was it that because if you didn't have a Climax in the back of your Cooper, then you were dead? But it's every car, every engine in the world seems to be in the back of a South African single-seater.
Yes. You used what you could afford. That was the first thing. In the case of Borgward, there was an entrepreneurial fellow called Wallman who supported motorsport in a big way. He sponsored the saloon cars, and he had his top mechanic Helmut Menzler build a beautiful little special, and even later bought a Lotus 18 and fitted a very rare Borgward motor into it. Jason Wright runs that car in Historics at the moment. Anyway, so Wallman sought to promote his showroom cars, win on Saturday, sell on Monday, that way by building the Borgward special. There was an Alfa factory in East London, Alfa Romeo, and in those days that was one of the fastest road cars around. These days every road car is fast. In those days, Volvos and Alfas were fast. And so bits were available. The sporting road driver obviously damaged quite a few Juliettas and that, and the scrapyards were a place for chaps like Van der Vyver and Seruria and de Klerk to raid.
Yes, I suppose that's it. Just go and find a damaged Giulietta. And of course, in those days, we're talking about Alfas being unusual, twin cam engines and lightweight and all those sorts of things. I mean, that's a natural. But tell me about some of the most successful single-seaters that we saw in the South African series.
Well, the first one was built in 1948, believe it or not, was a Citroen Special, built by a fellow called Stanley Reed. He when the auto unions came to South Africa pre-war, they put the auto unions in his showroom, his father's showroom, and his father dealt with Citroen and DKW, and he got ideas from the auto unions, a rear engine car in the day of front engine specials, and that car was very successful. It endured for many years, right up to like 1961. Okay, by that time it was totally outclassed. So that was one. Then Bill Jennings was a masterly driver and tuner. He found an old Riley, discarded 1936 Riley Sprite engine that I think was not Fay Taylor, Cape Peter, and it had thrown a rod.
Oh, right.
And he repaired that engine himself, built a front engine special, and won the championship several years until once again the rear engine revolution took. Then he built his own rear engine special using a Porsche engine.
Now I'm keeping up with this because I'm flicking through an excellent book that you have written, Special Brew, and it's. I mean, when I first received my copy of the book, I thought that Evro had gone into beer making, but no, they haven't. Thank you. And Evro Publishing have produced this book. We've seen so many different sorts of cars in there, and you've gone through, I don't know, it's probably 50 different manufacturers of cars, some one-offs, some a limited run. One of those limited runs was produced, and I think he produced 4 cars, but you may tell me differently, a man who had the wonderful name of Johann Abraham Rautenbach Hartmann. And did I get that right?
That's right.
And that you talk about his. Now, let's just talk about the first 3 cars to start with, because he started very much in that specials class, didn't he?
That's right. In, I think, about 1952, you can read it in the book. He was a mine shaft sinker in the gold mines, and he obviously had some mechanical flair, so started a little workshop in his spare time next to his house, which he'd built himself.
Oh, right.
And he became quite popular amongst, well, he repaired tractors, combined harvesters, and then motor cars, and then the sporting people came to him for what they called in those days souped up cars. But he was a Peugeot man, or Peugeot man, and he, interestingly, raced his Peugeots, and they were front-engine cars until 1964-ish or 3-ish, and he built a very good rear-engined Netua. Once again, with limited, what can I say, facilities and limited equipment. So he would grind his own crankshafts and things like that.
Yeah, and just to complete that circle, Netua, one of this wonderful man's names is Rautenbach, and if you take Rauten backwards, it's Netua, and that's how he how he called the cars that, which I think it's so typical of the special builder, isn't it? Right at the beginning, I said that those kind of cars, certainly in the UK, were always known as Bitzers, or there was one that ran at the same sort of time in the UK, which was called a MIM, M-I-M, which was short for Made It Myself, which I think that was the spirit of what it was. But I caught up with the current owner of the rear engine Netua at the Goodwood Spring Sprint a few weeks ago. Well, we heard from Rob Young about
all of these lovely cars in his new book, Special Brew. But it's a real treat to be here at the Goodwood Members Spring Sprint, because I'm with Arnout, who is co-owner of one of the cars that we talk about and that Rob was talking about earlier on, and that is the, did you say Nettoir?
Nettoir Peugeot, yes.
So it's a Nettoir, and until I read Rob's book, I hadn't realised that this is actually the original driver and constructor's name backwards.
It is, yes. So Routen Hartmann he built the car back in 63, 64 in order to compete in the RAN 64 Grand Prix. And he had a front engine car before this, but obviously as motorsport developed, he realized he needed to build a rear engine car. He moved the Peugeot engine over to this car, and it had its first Grand Prix in 64.
And the car itself, you've owned it for nigh on a decade now.
Yes.
What was it like when you got it?
So it had been partly restored in South Africa with Derek Nightingale and Jannie van Aswegen. Jannie found the car in the 80s, and then it was just a bare chassis and an engine block and a few bits and pieces. And over the next sort of 15, 20 years, they started rebuilding it. And then I had raced the Assegai, another South African Grand Prix car, at Goodwood, in fact, a number of times. And when that car was sold, I was looking for another South African car, and we found this. So we shipped it over in 2017. At the end of the year, and then it needed, because there were very few pictures of the car at the time, it didn't really resemble how it should look like. So we spent quite a bit of time and money getting new bodywork made, changing the suspension to reflect how it looked in period.
And obviously, looking at it here, it's immaculate, and there's no other way to put it. It is absolutely perfect, but probably better than it ever looked before.
Yeah, Routen really focused on performance. So when you see the car in period, it looked a bit sort of rough and ready. But he never had a lot of money. It was always all the parts were sourced from scrap heaps and broken cars, and he would just weld bits on as he saw fit. I think the car probably looks better now than it did in period. We're very proud to own it. It's a great part of South African motorsport history. The Hartmann family are still involved. So he has some family members living in the UK, and they come and see the car race. And his son is still alive in South Africa and follows with interest how the car's going. So it's an amazing piece of history, and we're very, very glad to own it.
Now, you mentioned that you raced the Assegai, which is another famous South African car, and very much out of the same mould as this, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was a 61 Grand Prix car. A bit more fortunate with that car that it had an Alpha engine in the back, so quite a bit more competitive. The Peugeot 403 engine, I think in period only like in a road going version, only I think it delivers about 50 horsepower. So to get it race ready is quite a task. Whereas an Alpha engine has, I think, just a bit more base horsepower, so a lot more competitive and a bit lighter as well. The Assegai was an amazing car to race. So the first race that we did in the UK was actually the Goodwood Revival, I think in 2000 or 2001.
And people who may be having a bit of trouble picturing the Assegai, it had that sort of shark nose that the Ferraris of the time had, which presumably was just a nod to the fashion of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So Tony Kotzer built the car. So I think the idea was actually it was run under Bond Motorsport or Bond Racing at the time, and the idea was to build multiple of those cars, so 2 or 3 of those cars, and then race them in Europe. So he was trying to get, I spoke to Tony before he passed away, and he was speaking to some of the cigarette brands in South Africa to help finance it. And unfortunately, it all fell apart and never happened. So he only built the one car. But yeah, I think we finished 9th in the revival once and 10th. So it was a fairly competitive car.
And coming back to the Nettoir, it's as I say, it's undoubtedly better than it ever would have been in the 60s. But that evolved into an Alfa Romeo powered car at one stage, didn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So, as I said, he never had a lot of money, and Rasen did. So he ran it with a Peugeot engine in the Sunshine Tour, so in the South African Formula One series. And then it got to the point where it just wasn't, it wasn't close to being competitive. So he managed to scrape the funds together and get an Alfa Romeo engine. And that made it more competitive. But by then, they were running V8s in the series. So it was never going to be a front runner. But this car has had many different lives. It started obviously as a Grand Prix car. Then he had the Alfa engine in it. Then he ran it in hill climbs. So we try and do that as well. So we run it at Shelsley Walsh hill climb in the UK, and we just try and do we try and get the car out as often as we can.
And long may that continue. Thank you very, very much indeed for your time.
No problem. It's been great speaking to you.
Now, unfortunately, I know you'll be unhappy to hear this, Rob, that the car did have a bit of an off at Goodwood, and Goodwood is a very quick circuit. Thankfully, no injuries, but the car is a little the worse for wear. I didn't get to see it when it had its off at Goodwood because they took it straight home. It never even got back to the paddock. They took it straight back to the trailer and whizzed it off. But I understand that it's certainly repairable, but it's just one of those things. But we also heard in that interview Arnout talking about the Assegai, and many of our British listeners will know the Assegai because that's had a bit of a life in historic racing in the UK as well. So that's a nice looking car, isn't it?
Indeed, it was quite striking in its time. I think Kotze, who designed it and built it, had seen a shark nose 156 Ferrari, and that gave him a bit of an idea about layout. Tony was a very hard and competitive driver. Unfortunately, he was very hard on engines and that. But the car definitely handled very well. It was very low and wide, and the dimensions were very much Lotus 18. And if you look at all the successful South Africa, the de Klerk special and that, very much Lotus 18. De Klerk had worked for Lotus, and he'd also prepared Sid van der Veever's Lotus 18. So the 18 was a superb motor car, and then of course Sid van der Veever prepared the handling of Sterling Moss's 18 for Rob Walker when it won 2 World Championship events. Sid had been called over with Alec Wishart to help. They didn't get on, of course, with the Polish man. Sid came to blows, so unfortunately they left then. But they got ideas.
Yeah, and I think that kind of confirms everything that we're talking about in terms of the special builder. They are a different breed, aren't they? And you mentioned the Lotus 18. Let's not forget that the arch special builder was Colin Chapman. That he made cars in the courtyard of Hazel Chapman's father's pub in Hornsey in North London. So, that's where the Lotus mark started. I mean, it's ended up as a Chinese-owned electric car producer, but we'll not go there. We'll go over that. We'll do it. Now, as I say, love the book. It's so full of stories. It's so full of cars. It's got everything in it. Where can people get it, Rob?
Evro. And I think it's according to Mark Hughes from Evro, who has been very helpful with, and I'm grateful for his help in this. It's also available at major car-selling booksellers.
Get along and get it, because if you want to know about where our sport comes from, then Rob's book is absolutely there. It's got everything going for it. It tells you probably something that you didn't know that you needed to know, but it's an excellent book. So please, everybody, get out there and do that. And just looking down the list of contents that we've got, I said about the Borgward Special, the SRP Alfa Romeo, the Eland Simca, the Maserati Chevrolet. Now, there's two words you don't hear very often together, but all those things. Rob, thank you so much for coming on the show. Good luck with the book. I know that it's going to be a huge success. Looking forward to that, and that I shall get back to it and start living the dream again. But Robert Young, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Paul. Nice to chat.
Well, that brings us to the end of the first half of the show, but don't go away, because in part 2 we'll be unveiling, amongst other things, our new Driver of the Month feature.
Don't miss part 2 of the May edition of Historic Racing News. The boys will recap members' meeting, and we will unveil our first Driver of the Month. The preceding was a copyrighted presentation of Historic Racing News in association with White Squirrel Studios. Any rebroadcast, reproduction or usage without the expressed written permission of Historic Racing News is strictly prohibited.